Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about a build that I might be league starting in the upcoming Legacy of Frisia event. So some of you guys might remember the Kinetic Blast of Clustering build, that Hierophant, that I've done last league. It was basically my last build. It was kind of like a juicer. I put around about 1.5 mirrors into the build, and at the time I was under the impression that it was not really league startable, maybe something with a ballista angle to make it a little bit more cozy. But in general, I thought this was kind of just beholden to an endgame build. But some of the new Ascendancies, plus some people that I know who have been testing this out on a tight budget, have kind of made me reconsider that. And the Whisper Ascendancy is probably the biggest one that made me reconsider. So I'm kind of going to go over what I'm thinking here and how the build works. So Kinetic Blast of Clustering has a few lines here. The most important thing you have to know about it is increasing its projectiles actually doesn't increase it directly. Basically, if you connect with something, it will give you explosions, as you can see right here. And depending on how many projectiles you have, the more explosions you get. But it will always be this one tiny projectile. And there's a lot of problems with that. You don't want to just like rush through the map and have to actually aim exactly to an enemy. In endgame, that can be quite cumbersome. But you can use Fork, or as we will see, Awakened Fork, with Tornado on a Spellslinger. So you put on Spellslinger, Q, and now whenever you press your right mouse button, there will be a tornado spawning in front of you. And it will always spawn exactly where you're aiming. So what happens is this, right? In general, this setup is incredibly nice for clear. It is a little weird with like AoE. You don't want to increase it too much. How many explosions do you want? That's all like debatable. But in general, it is one of the best clear speed skills I've played, period. And in terms of league starting it, it has two interesting mods here. The first one is it takes increases and reductions from spell damage as 200% of their value. So for example, if you had, I don't know, for example, a Indigon, let's see at this endgame PoE here. If you had an Indigon that can give you up to 2000% spell damage, that is actually 4000 attack damage. A few important things to note here. The first one is this says just maximum mana. You can actually reserve your mana and it will not decrease your damage. And second up, you can see right here, I just put this on a level 76. At level 80, you're going to have around about 5000 mana. So if we do the math right here, 5000 times 0.15, that is 750 flat physical. And if we look, for example, at Mira tier 1s, you will see that's almost double. And you can get well above 10,000 mana. However, as always, the question is this league startable? And my first iteration was kind of like, meh. I think Hierophant doesn't really have all that much punch, especially early. It gives you AoE, it gives you a little bit of damage with Divine Guidance, but the problem is on an attack-based build, you can't make use of Arcane Blessing, and Pursuit of Faith is kind of meh. So you're still looking at a 3-point Ascendancy. In endgame, it was fine, but Ascendancies are usually 3 points that are supposed to carry you on a league starter. Well, let's look at what Whisper gives us. So the first node I'm going to start with is not even the mana node. Let's start at Have You Forgotten. Awakened Fork, right, is a gem that usually costs around 20 divines whenever it's meta. That's what I bought mine for last league. And Awakened Fork is ridiculous. Not only do you get one fork, you actually get two. Which means that with the passive tree nodes right here, you can get a ton of projectiles. And if you have returning projectile and your skill, like for example, Kinetic Blast of Clustering, can innately shotgun, the AoEs at least, then it gets pretty crazy. And the reason this is so funny is because this is one of the builds that can make the most use of Awakened Fork. Because usually what happens is you have like a skill with 7 projectiles, you hit something, it forks, and good chances are you're never gonna fork again. But with this build, your tornado at the start already uses up one of the forks. So it can easily hit another enemy and then use up the second fork, which means, long story short, this is one of the reasons I never wanted to league start this build, is because Awakened Fork is such a big gate to get to, and the difference between Fork and Awakened Fork is so big. Getting this on Ascendancy is just ridiculous. But let's talk about the more obvious stat, I guess, which is the 1 maximum mana per dexterity from Infinite Pursuit right here. It says Intelligence provides no inherent bonus to maximum mana, which means that pathing on the top is a little bit awkward. You can tattoo the int nodes away, but in general, it's still really weird, and you would kind of want to stay in the Ranger area. But if you stay in the Ranger area, as you can see here on my lower investment version, you can see I'm still on like 800 dexterity, and there's no Astramentis or anything here. Every gear piece has roundabout tier 3 dexterity. Some of them even have crafted dexterity, like here. Just pretty easy to get. And 800 flat mana is just so wild. Talking about percentage mana, that's one thing you can actually get from the passive tree, but flat mana is extremely premium. I mean, if you look at items, you get like 60 here, 70 there, and whatnot, and getting 800 with endgame scaling that can go into the few thousands, it's just wild. This node is just amazing for anything mana stacking. And then we have 2 more nodes that are quite good for this archetype, which is There Is More, minimum frenzy, minimum power charges. Now you can get those theoretically. The +1 you cannot get. You're not really stacking anything. It's just very, very cozy to have, and you don't have to think about getting them. You don't have to think about generating them, which usually has some kind of opportunity cost. So it's kind of like Conviction of Power, just a little bit worse in general. However, I will say this, Frenzy charges, having 4 Frenzy charges up always, even without Blood Rage on bosses and whatnot, it's very nice for your shield charge speed and whatnot. So I might actually take this first, for example, while leveling. So that's pretty nice. And then as our last node, we have Wait a Little, which gives us 10 rage after spending a total of 200 mana, which you can get up to 30 rage. That's 30% more damage, which is very strong for an Ascendancy. You can actually scale more if you want to. For example, we take the Berserking here. So it is a very strong Ascendancy. I don't think we're going to do anything crazy with it. Now, in terms of POBs, I made 2 right here. The first one is this is per projectile, by the way. The first one I made was more of a day 2. This is basically you get your first shitty 6-link. You're not going to have a unique 6-link, but just your first 6-link, preferably evasion-based something. I might actually rework a lot of these to evasion whenever this comes out, because Energy Shield doesn't really do much. You get quite a bit of percentage evasion actually from just Dexterity, which I haven't really thought about here. But yeah, it's mostly just rare items with some mods. The resistance is here, so just count for suffixes if you can actually do this and think about it that way. You can also grab some stats right here. But in general, this is just an outline for where I want to be on roundabout day 2, maybe day 3. And then I also made a POB for a little bit further down the road, which has stuff like a Link Wand, which is ridiculous, right? You have a Squire, you have an Indigon, so this would be around about 100 plus Divines. And I'm probably going to make something in the middle as well. But yeah, I don't really know where this is going to go, because like I said, I can't really test it out. But just so kind of I can know what to steer towards to. One thing I want to note, because people have been saying this, is you don't need an Indigon to make it work, even though you don't have that much mana cost, simply because, at least as far as I know, Arcane Cloak actually works for it. It works in terms of consuming mana for Indigon, so it should also work for this one right here. Otherwise, you're probably only going to be in the 10-20 rage node, but I'm pretty sure it works. Actually, I almost forgot. One thing you can do once you have Indigon and a lot of mana consumption is you can actually use Berserk with an Enhance, and your Berserk uptime is going to be as long as you keep casting, because no matter how much it degens, you just ramp up over and over and over because you're spending so much mana. But in general, when I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about league starting Kinetic Blast of Clustering, which has been highly requested from a lot of you guys, then I think this is really good opportunity to do it. I don't know exactly how it's gonna work out, but if I think about getting like Awakened Fork as early as level 32, it's just completely mind-boggling. Minimum frenzy charges are gonna be very cozy. This is going to scale so well. There is a few concerns about this. The first one is the pathing is a little bit weird. You don't really get to a wand cluster, but we still are able to get 1 additional projectile here for the extra explosion. AoE is a little bit of an issue. In my endgame version, I actually do have Awakened Area of Effect, which I can sub out for Conk Effect. In general, though, if you look at what I have right here, this is actually with Conk Effect. So I put Conk Effect in to counteract the AoE from this. I can actually just remove it and then remove the Conk Effect to show you real quickly. It was just a little bit weird while mapping because of the less mana cost. But this is how it looks like. I don't think like the AoE is going to struggle whatsoever. We'll have to see. But there's still a few open questions in general that we're going to test out over the next few days. I do have a few setups right here. Like, for example, this leveling setup that Pridus lent me very nicely. I have an Absolute Mirror tier 1 right here, for example. So I'm going to test this one out a little bit and see where the how far I can go. But there's a few questions we have here. The first one is, how smooth is the transition at level 68? We all know how smooth it is to level a Ranger, and being a Ranger is actually a huge payoff versus being a Templar. There's a lot more respecking going on, at least here. Both are, like, whatever you're leveling is going to be an attack-based build, whereas on the Templar, you would most likely be rolling Magma. But the question is, on a 4-link, getting into white maps, getting into yellow maps, how is it going to feel? I personally think it's going to feel fine because of the Awakened Fork mostly, and because we do get quite a bit of attack speed because we're right side now. One of the things that felt a little bit weird early on the Templar version was the attack speed. You needed to get quite a bit from jewels, but here that's not really as necessary. Also getting a lot of flat mana means that you don't really need all that much mana on gear. As you can see right here, if I go to the early game version, I have a lot of crafted mana across the board. I think I actually put crafted mana on almost all my pieces simply because Dex kind of alleviates that. Early on, this is kind of like getting 400 to 500 maximum mana for free just from pathing around the tree and from Utmost Swiftness. And then on top of that, you can hit either mana or Dex, preferably both. Or you hit one and then craft the other. But that is also going to be a thing that I have to think about is it annoying to get to gear it? I don't think so currently. I tried to stay with mostly rares. I'm also going for a Lyra, so I think the res is overall going to be fine. We're not going to be Chaos res capped anytime soon. I put this right here for now. 120 all res. We have almost all our suffixes open other than Dexterity. We'll have to see. Maybe we're going to have to make some concessions. But in general, I think it's going to be fine up to a certain point. Obvious question for almost every League starter ever is, will this single target be fine? The clear is going to be absolutely massive, but that doesn't really help you if you're going to stand there at a boss for like 20 seconds. What I've heard from people is it's going to be pretty fine, but who knows? We're going to see. And then the last question is, will Indigon be annoying to use? Now, here's the deal. Attack-based mana builds are quite a bit different than spell-based, because on spell-based mana builds, recovery is a big deal. Getting regen is a big deal because you cannot leech. That is rough. On an attack-based build, you get instant leech, you get leech, and you're going to have an absolute crap ton of recovery. Now, this one is, in terms of instant leech, only from one hit. So all these projectiles you've seen right here, it is very hard to know how much we're actually going to recover here. But as you can see, if you look at the spending of Indigon, you can see you're going to need quite a bit. Now, the way I commented this last league, and it felt really good on my Hierophant last league, the way I commented this is with the Mana Mastery, 10% chance to recover 10% of mana, plus the Watcher's Eye, which is additive with it. It has the same mod while you have Clarity. So you can get up to 25% chance to recover 10% of your max mana. The downside is, on Hierophant, you're getting 50% less mana cost, which you might think, oh, that's going to make it a lot easier to ramp. That is true, but I also, on my Hierophant, I only had like 5-6k mana. So percentage-wise, I'm regaining way more mana on this version because I'm going to have 9,000 to 10,000 mana instead because of this node right here. Now, most of the reason why I want to play this build is I'm just going to play the build from last league is it's just so goddamn fun. The bitrate is kind of weird, but my FPS was overall pretty damn fine. It is one of the most fun builds ever. There's obviously a Mage Blood with like Tormented Spirit Enchant and everything, but the clear speed in terms of just the AoE, the sheer AoE you get is quite incredible, and it is just one of the most fun builds I've ever played. So it would be nice to kind of test this and maybe learn from it for like future leagues. And I mean, I have to take the opportunity almost. Important to note though is you don't necessarily need a skill that has inherent conversion from spell damage to use Indigon, because you can also use your Mind is Destroyed right here, which gives you 150% conversion. So you can use this on Lightning Strike, you can use this on whatever. And just the fact that you're able to, oh god, I just opened PoE 2. Oh no, there it is. Just the fact that you can scale Mind over Matter and you can get pretty good max hit is quite nice. One of the things though is that you have to remember mana builds have a lot of raw AHP and not that much, I don't know, stuff like evade or block, which means it's also very good against dots. And usually when it comes to tier 17s and stuff leading up to it, dots are kind of a big issue, not as much on this build. But yeah, I'll be testing this build quite a bit over the next few days over on twitch.tv/Palsteron. Let's see if we can make it work. I don't know exactly how I want to test this. It's kind of hard without the Ascendancies. I was thinking about probably going for a Awakened Fork in a 5th link to represent this. I'm probably going to completely like just remove all the Ascendancy points, then put in an Awakened Fork as a 5th link. And for this, I'm probably going to have to put on like a replica Chaos or something, because this gives so much flat mana just to have like an interesting representation. And I'm going to level a Ranger just to kind of do this. We'll see, whatever comes out of it. As for build guides, I'm going to make a video about it. I'm going to explain everything, but as always, I can't really test it. So take that with a grain of salt. I'm pretty damn stoked to League Start a Wander. I don't think I ever have had the opportunity. Power Side of Minds, obviously. out of the way, but just a straight up Wander clear speed god would be so much fun if it was actually able to league start in this event. We'll see. But since I still never slogan, see you next time.